This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, we were in Standing Finance Committee. We return to Standing Finance Committee.
This House is in Standing Finance Committee. Honourable Member for St. Michael, South Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. AG, I wanted to ask you about the policy and practice with respect to the expungement of criminal records. I think several members in this chamber are asked about it very often. I think that there's space to establish some clarity on how does this work, when does it apply, what is the procedure, what it is and what it is not. Because I do feel that there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance of knowing, of understanding when one should be aware of a person's record and when perhaps one should use it as a tool to be able to establish new opportunities for people or give people a second chance at employment and at being, at contributing to society and making sure that they are not at a disadvantage. I also think that there is a question, a public question about how this relates to the issue of minor drug offenses, given where the country is going with respect to medicinal cannabis and perhaps later other use cases for cannabis. So can you say a bit about the process when it applies? How do we maintain the balance of giving people new opportunities, but also making sure we have a record of previous behavior that might affect decisions made during the judicial process, and then how it relates to this issue of how we treat with minor offenses related to cannabis?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Let me say that I remarked recently in a section of the press that I really felt that Barbadians needed to make greater use of the provisions of the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. This statute was passed in 1997. And since then, it has been an avenue for Barbadians to come forward with a clean slate. And I thank you for the opportunity just to explain briefly to the public what it is. And I'm also able to share some statistics with you so that you can get an idea of how it has been used and we can gauge how it is working. An individual who has been convicted of an offense and has certain kinds of penalties is able to have his or her record expunged. I'll give you the, yeah, thank you. You must, after conviction, serve a rehabilitation period. And that rehabilitation period, in the case of a person who has been sentenced to prison for a term of less than a year, that rehabilitation period is 3 years. So what that means is that 3 years after you've completed your sentence, you are considered to have been rehabilitated for the purposes of this act. So if your sentence is a term not exceeding a year, your rehabilitation period is 3 years. So you serve your year, then you have 3 years of good behavior, and then you're eligible to have that record expunged. If you are sentenced to a term between 1 year and not exceeding 3 years, so between 1 and 3 years, your rehabilitation is longer because obviously the harsher the penalty, then it is presumed, it's reasonable to presume, to assume that the offense or the gravity of the offense is greater. So you have a longer rehabilitation period. So if you serve an offense for between 1 year and 3 years, your rehabilitation period within which you must keep your nose clean, as they say, is 5 years. If you are in prison for between 3 years and 7 years, your rehabilitation period, consistent with your more serious offense, is 10 years. If you are not given a custodial sentence, then your rehabilitation period is 1 year. So, depending on the severity of your offense, and the severity of your sentence, then once your rehabilitation period has passed, you can apply to the committee and ask to have your record expunged. Now, many people do believe that you can have your record expunged as a matter of course, no matter what happens after you serve your time. That is not the case. When you apply to have your record expunged, it goes to the committee. You have to submit supporting documentation, reference letters, and so on. Nothing onerous. But the burden is on you to prove that you have been on good behavior. So just because the time passes and you apply, it doesn't mean that you will automatically have your record expunged. The matters are invariably referred to the police, and the police will then do certain background checks. They will see if you're under investigation, for example, for other criminal offenses. So, for example, a person who may have had a 1 year sentence, the rehabilitation period has passed, and they have applied. It goes to the police. The police will check their records and see whether you are under investigation for a murder charge, a gun charge, a rape charge, whatever it is. Your record is not going to get expunged. We've had instances where individuals charged in Barbados served their time and then sought expungement. But we have good relationships with police services in other jurisdictions, and these same individuals were found to have been charged with drug offenses in St. Vincent. So even though within our territory there was nothing during that time in St. Vincent, there were drug charges. So we look at all those things, and then you get your record expunged. Now, I regret that many people are not coming forward, or perhaps I should say not as many people as possible. I can tell you that that's the correct one, thank you. Can't find the email. Permit me to give the chamber some statistics. And I'm going to give you some statistics from 2018 through the end of 2022. During that period, we've had 467 persons applying for expungement of records. Of that 467, 273 were approved. Now, that's not bad. 160, however, had to be deferred. Now, the deferral happens for a number of reasons. Deferral happens for a number of reasons. Sometimes people get fined, but don't pay the fine. So you have to satisfy your debt to the state. You must serve your penalty, whether that penalty is in terms of a sentence of imprisonment or in terms of a pecuniary penalty. We can't insist that one man, because he has been sentenced to prison, that he served his time, but you get off with a fine, but you can get an expunged and you haven't paid the fine. So you get deferred for those reasons. You also get deferred because sometimes the documentation isn't complete. So that's not a small number, but in circumstances where they're simply not able to proceed beyond, unless the individual comes back with more complete data, you get deferred. So 160 instances were deferred. Over that period, only 22 were denied. Only 22 were denied, and then there were a few where seven where individuals were ineligible. Now, in relation to cannabis, that's perhaps the easiest one, because when we amended the Drug Abuse Control and Prevention Act just 2 years ago to allow an individual to have in his possession without having to go to court, without having to get a charge sheet to go to court, a non-trafficable amount of cannabis. Non-trafficable amount is less than 14 point something grams. Let's say less than 15 grams. We took that decision, but we also felt that it was the fair thing to do if we are going to put people with small amounts of cannabis on the road to rehabilitation. We felt that we should not persist with a lifelong penalty for those who were convicted under the previous regime. And therefore, the amendment to that act provided that as of the date when that amendment became effective, all persons who were convicted of having minor amounts of cannabis, again, I repeat the amount, less than the 14.5 grams or whatever it was, their record is automatically expunged. So if you have a constituent who was found with a spliff or so, went to court, found guilty, they don't have to apply for an expungement. They don't have to apply for an expungement. By operation of law, under that particular amendment, the Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act, by operation of law, that record is automatically expunged, and that got rid of thousands and thousands of individuals. But there are still people who come forward and say, we didn't know that you could do this, we didn't know you could do that. And in many instances, Honourable Member, individuals who perhaps for the first time apply for certificates of character to be reminded, I can't say to find out because they would have known, to reminded that they had been convicted back in 1980 or 1990 of an offense, but they want a job on a cruise ship or they want a job on the farm labor program or something. And then they come running to say, well, we want to apply for the expungement of the record, but it takes time. And I regret to say that sometimes we're able to expedite it, other times the individuals lose the opportunity. There is more scope for this committee to do its work, and for those individuals, search your heart. I know some people forget that they get a fine. They forget. I mean, people forget things. I came across a businessman recently who forgot that he had been fined for not complying with his income tax requirements. It happened so long ago he forgot. But now has to get an expungement. So I urge people to come forward and take the benefit of this. But there are some opportunities that we have to, or there are some instances that we have to look at. And we have to dig deep and ask ourselves if this is enough. I recently met a young man who had been charged with manslaughter. And his penalty was greater than the penalty set out in the law. He had served over it was 7, right? Yeah, his time was over 7 years. But you know, the purpose of prison is also to rehabilitate. And rehabilitate not just in the sense of putting you on a firm footing in the right direction, but also to say that you've paid your debt to society and we think that we should welcome you back with open arms. Regrettably, that individual has turned his life around, has a small business, and is a model citizen and has been a model citizen for over 10 years. But under the law as it stands, we cannot expunge his record. I've had some discussions with the chairwoman of the committee, and I've asked for their recommendations. They've sent me some recommendations for amendment, but I'm going to send them back and ask them to have another look at it, because I think that we have to, while there are always consequences we must always give ourselves enough flexibility to be able to do justice in a different kind of way.
Yes, Honourable Member, we have given you some flexibility, so just wrap up in 2 seconds. Thank you.
But I will answer your follow-up when you ask me.
My last question has to do with something that you made reference to earlier when you said, in response to another question, I believe it was the member for St. Peter, when you said that Barbados is adequately policed. And I think that by that, you mean generally in terms of the level of effort that it requires to do the regular act, carry out the regular acts that a police force service might need to engage in, that it is adequately policed. But, you know, police are in the business of enforcement of all kinds of things. Often when we think of the police service, we tend to think about major crimes and so on, but the police, as we all know, are in the business of enforcement outside of the commission of criminal acts. So, for example, something that was very topical recently, if an officer from veterinary services has to go and remove an animal for poor treatment in order to gain access to the property or in order to enforce whatever, they will need to have an officer accompany them. There are all kinds of things that we might consider minor, from fender benders to all kinds of things where currently you need to have a member of the police service present and enforcing. Now, given some of the man and woman power considerations of the force, how are you able to prioritize and be able to establish other kinds of resources, kinds of para-policing, individuals who may not have to come through the police service and be police officers, but can help to carry out some of the activities of enforcement that need to be done? And further to that, because this is a particular concern of mine, further to that, how are you ensuring that they've received the adequate training to be able to engage with the public in a responsible way? That's a concern that I have, because a police officer is a police officer. But when there are all these other kinds of para roles, then I get concerned that they do not have the adequate training. And in my experience in Barbados, sometimes you give a person a baton and a whistle, and all of a sudden they feel that they have all the authority in the world. So can you address that for us, please?
Honourable Member, I will, of course, ask the Commissioner to weigh in, but I do want to say make a few general observations. You know, it seems to me that people in Barbados call the police for everything. And as a lawyer, and I look around the chamber and see that there are only two present on the members' benches. You know, because police are there to keep the peace, no matter what it is that happens, no matter what it is that erupts, the police do get called in. So we get called in the instance where somebody wants to have access to a property. There are myriad other occasions when the legislation, many of them old, says that you shall, a member of the Barbados Police, the Royal Barbados Police Force, will come and do this and will come and do that. And then, of course, if the neighbor dog barking too loud, call the police. Okay? You have a disagreement over a closed lane, call the police. Somebody like Mark missing, call the police. And the police very rightly and generously respond. But it is a challenge because there are many instances when the law provides for other remedies. But nobody wants to call a lawyer, nobody wants to try to follow up on what those remedies are. It is so much easier to call the police because the police is seen as the body who comes in and tries to quell any disturbance. Perhaps it is right that they should do so, but there are many instances, I think, and Commissioner, we will probably need to better educate the public so that they understand that the resources of the police are stretched, and there are some instances when what you need is not to call the police, what you need is to call an attorney because the neighbor is trespassing. A trespass is a civil offense. So that's nothing to do with the police. Now, if you start a fight, then call the police fast. But generally, for a lot of the disputes and so on that the police will get called in for, it is properly not their purview. We do have special constables who are known to be upgraded to be into the police force. That legislation is just about completed by the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel. We committed to that, and that is to happen shortly, so they will transition into police officers. And of course, we have the unsung heroes or island constables who perhaps rose to show their worth during COVID, when at a time when Barbadians were running from each other and so on, they joined with the ranks of the police service to provide that integral support that we needed to help to police Barbados when it came to people complying with COVID directives. I'll let the Commissioner go in, but I just wanted to come in now, but I just wanted to make the point that, please, there are other remedies. Don't call the police for everything. Sometimes you do need to, but sometimes you really need to reflect on whether it is the police that you need. And so, Mr. Commissioner, over to you.
Thanks, Chairman. The question is well asked. And from my perspective, the police knows their powers, they know their functions, and one of the functions of the police is to ensure the well-being of society and intervene when it's deemed fit. Now, historically, we're well aware that the various acts give agencies powers to take certain action under the act. And we find that persons are somewhat timid to use those powers which are entrenched in certain laws. And we do not hesitate to assist any agency that calls on the police for help. The main reason why we accede to the requests, because we find that when we don't go and assist, things can get out of hand. So the preventative aspect of it is critical to the whole situation. Now, it's better to go and assist and have things run smoothly, maintain peace, than have to respond to a serious wounding, a murder, or something like that. So sometimes a stitch in time saves 9. So we have to act on it that way. Yes, and the other aspect of it is prioritization of matters, reports, or whatever. Now, we seek to respond to almost every matter which is reported. John Brown might call the station at 10 o'clock. That report is in. But if at 10 past 10 something more serious comes in, obviously we have to weigh the variables here and say, but this is more serious. We respond to that instead of this one. So that is how we have to operate, look at certain situations and operate to suit.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just by way of very quick follow-up, I wondered if you could say a bit more about the training for the special constables and island constables and these para-policing forces that you may have to make use of. In particular, I think of the AG made reference earlier to different kinds of training that the police themselves will be benefiting from, for example, with respect to intimate partner violence and so on. But acknowledging that your resources are stretched as it is, and that you do, as you say, Commissioner, do try to still respond to every incident or every call, you will from time to time have to make use of or partner with other kinds of agencies or or individuals like these special and island constables. Can you give us confidence, in other words, that these individuals receive the level of training that would give Barbadians and those who live here a sense of trust and confidence that they can rely on them almost in a similar way to how they rely on or trust the police force service?
Yes, I can reassure the general public and members of society that the training which is given to members of the Special Constabulary is done at the Regional Police Training Center. The syllabus is well put together. The acts that they function under, these acts are explained to them. They are given scenarios, it's played out. They're taken through the process, arresting, not the charging process, but those types of things that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. How the arresting powers on the Trespass Act, all those things, they're thought. But before they actually go out in the field, they are partnered with a trained police officer, taken through the procedures, how to go about it, because some days they have to operate on their own. So we have to make sure that when they're out there, they know exactly how far in the law to go. Additional to that, we also have the support of the Barbados Defense Force, who can also support and boost our resources. So that is another avenue which we rely on to help us through any shortage or constrain us where we are constrained in certain things, not able to have the necessary persons out in the field or responding to any situation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's everything from me. Thanks to the AG and to the Ministry for your responses.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Good afternoon, honourable members and the distinguished staff from the Attorney General's office. I want to just be as brief as possible because I consider the queries I want to make perhaps sounding simple, but I believe that they have deep impact on a lot of what we are doing in order for us to upgrade what is happening in the country. I am a strong believer, and I believe many other people of my age group are, that upward social mobility has really impacted a lot on our ways of living, where we would have had persons growing up in our communities. They looked after the neighbors' children when they came home from school, because parents are out in the fields and in people's houses and so working. And they made sure that they were meaningfully engaged. Now we've got the new way of living where the extended family is now dwindling away, and we are now seeing this nuclear family approach coming, where children are left on their own most of the time. And I speak a lot about the latchkey children who go into homes, they do as they please, they're simple, generally nobody to guide them. At the time when we grew up, let me say I grew up, Mr. Chairman, so because you're so much younger, but at the time when I grew up, there were community leaders, godparents, neighbors who looked out for you. The bus driver was one of the strongest role models we had, the postman, and persons of that kind, not to mention the classroom teachers and the community workers. And these changes in our value system have really had a terrible impact on what is happening. And now with the technology, so many of our children are exposed to being on their own. The sites that they go on sometimes are for adults. Parents don't know what they're doing, who their friends are. Some of them are being invited to have all kinds of literature crammed down their stomach as a result. Others into knowing how to commit suicide, how to do all these different things. Pedophiles are in the system. And I believe that if we try to get back to community life, making sure that most of these single-headed households that are generally women in the large numbers, a large percentage, that the community life will help. And so I want to find out what synergies there are with the various institutions within government to be able to get these children, these young people and others going and growing and doing the things that are correct. From the era of that song that came out of one of the Caribbean islands, what the hell the police could do, I have seen so much go wrong with the disrespect that is meted out to law and order, particularly to our police officers. And so I believe that if we get back to community life, where the community development department, our schools, where boys will go to scouts, girls will go to guides and brownies, Christian fellowship and so on. If we get back to that and making an all-embracing community where persons who have skills can help through the church, who through the same teachers, through other people who have got those innate abilities and have had the experience to promote them to that level, to my mind, that will help. So I want to find out what really tight relationships are being planned at this time to be able for us to hold back our communities that we are losing by the minute. Rural communities were different from urban communities. Now what we are seeing permeating in the urban communities is gradually spreading over. Another thing is, when it came to our secondary schools in particular, schools were accommodating for children who lived in the adjoining parishes. So children in St. Thomas would have only gone to secondary school in town because they would have passed what we call the screening test. But those numbers were so small. But the Allen School was a major school for St. Joseph, St. Peter, St. Thomas, sections of St. James, and so on. Now our children are taking buses from St. Lucie, going to St. George Secondary. Some are going from St. Andrew all the way up to St. Philip. And I think that too, because of the guidance that our children require, that is impacting on a lot of what is happening. And they are having wrong role models. They're now looking at the Dangorgons. Is that the right name, Mr. Minister? Yeah? Dangorgons and all that. Children are being offered gifts to put in their school bags and to take to other people, and they don't even know what the contents are, and they're giving up $50. Or they're driving on the public service vehicles, and they're being told, don't give me the bus fare. When they come back this evening, we can talk. And there are young girls that are being targeted in that way as well. So we've lost a lot of what has helped to promote this society. So my question is, what connections are there with the same community development, youth affairs, substance abuse board, I think that's what they call it, the substance abuse board, schools generally, and so on, in order for us to see how best we can capture those individuals, especially our young children who are exposed to so much and who are now developing manners and misbehaviors that are, I can't call them manners, but misbehavior meted out towards particularly the police, who have been there for so many generations, giving of their service and training and helping young people within the community. So community policing has to be extremely critical if we are to win this war. Don't let me say war either, because war sounds like something that's really very, very negative, although it is. But to win this battle that is taking place within our various institutions, and to be able to help our children and our young parents and others to get a better understanding as to their roles in guiding their children and helping other people's children as well, because it was not one household helping its own, but it was other people and mature persons, both males and females, hand-holding those children and guiding them to be able to do the right thing. I'm not so sure how the Honourable Minister will want, and the ministers, I should say, would want to give us some idea of that, because our moral and spiritual values are just going down the drain, and the high disrespect that we are witnessing towards the constabulary in particular really needs to be addressed with urgency. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, I'll ask member for the city to respond.
Thank you, AG, and thank you, Honourable Member, for your correct assessment of what's happening in our society. I'm happy to report that within the sub-program that I described at the outset, that we are fully aware of all the elements that you spoke to, and the AG earlier spoke about the mapping of crime. And I'm speaking now to urban and rural, that we do have a geospatial map of crime, and that map speaks to where crime is occurring. Now, what is interesting is that if you look at a geospatial map of where the accusers are from, you will see that it has a broader look than just concentrating on what we are calling hotspots. So what I'm saying to this House is that when you assess the situation of crime in Barbados, this is an all-of-nation approach because it is an all-of-nation problem. So when you look at who is accused of committing these crimes, you would realize that they are from all over Barbados. You would recognize that they are in all of the schools, that we party together, we learn together, we work together, we shop together. Therefore, we must work on this situation together. So to answer your question, Honourable Member, we are taking a national approach, and whereas there are some areas with greater what we call heat, or we call hot spots, or we refer to as high-risk areas, this program is committed to ensuring that we have preventative programs throughout the island of Barbados. So the member for St. Peter, St. Thomas, St. Andrew, St. Joseph can rest assured knowing that the programs would touch every corner of this land in the Republic of Barbados. In addition, one of the things that we are doing is we are putting out a national public call shortly, and that is really for two main purposes. One is to highlight to Barbadians that it is time to now stop cursing the darkness, but to contribute by lighting that candle or turning on that LED, solar powered if you may, so that we can move away from the nonsense of every time there is an occurrence, people say, where the AG? Where the police? I want people now to reflect on that mirror image and ask what it is that they can do. So this national database will look at a national database of groups, community actors, agencies within government and outside of government, the same Ministry of Sports, Youth Sports, Community Empowerment, the Community Police, the Ministry of Education, all of who we've met with and is really committed on ensuring that we put a database out there for parents, teachers, guidance counselors, when they see at-risk youth, when they see high-risk individuals, that they have a database that we can now link activities and bring back activities to our community. So it is not just okay now for people to say we want people in the Boy Scouts and the Girl Guides. We are now calling on Barbadians because all of these organizations require mentors, require leaders. So we're asking all of Barbados to come on board and join us as we move forward to make Barbados a safer, more peaceful and civil society.
Thank you, sir. My second question, whether it is in the correct space or not today, is really associated with the salaries of police officers. I do not know that the ministry itself would have that. I know it has to be put in the estimates eventually. But I have witnessed over the years, and I speak with boldness, because I've got so many of my former students who are now police officers, and I regretted that I'm so old that I couldn't join. And I had an interest too, but I would have been engaged in the classroom and did not want to interrupt the service, but that's what I prefer doing. But I know that teachers' salaries are some of the highest in this country, and they deserve it, because it is not an easy task to help to shape and to mold minds. And of course, to work with parents and guardians, who most of them now don't even go to a PTA meeting, and therefore they don't pick up a lot of the information. But the query I want to make is in respect of the high cost of living, as well as the police force not being able to attract those almost 200, I believe, sir, persons to be able to have to carry out. So it says that police officers are overloaded in every respect. And I agree that we do need females there as well, but we need more males to be able to assist in helping to pilot all of those projects, those plans, those programs that will help to keep our communities safer. There's no understanding of police officers who are working 25 and 30 years and taking home a few dollars more than those guys that we have working in the ASH program at the end of the month. And the kind of arduous situations that they have to be exposed to, the dangerous ones. To my mind, adding more funds to their salaries will help to empower them a little more to be able to get on with their lives, and of course to put a little more into it. But if the salaries are so low, it is not going to attract the best of individuals who will want to. And I know, yes, and I agree, the rigidity that should take place in ensuring that the persons who are being identified are upright citizens who will continue to carry on the morals, the values, the respect that is due in an office of that nature. And I want to know what plans there are. Is the police force planning to have some cadets like the fire service has been doing, so that the young people go in, they get engaged, and at the end of it all, they say, I want to be a fire officer? Is the institution planning that, to be able to see how they can attract it, and not only from adults coming in to do it, but children within our secondary schools, starting with them, and that helps them to be able to develop that interest in wanting to become a police, not to be out there putting on handcuffs and beating up people and so on. That's not the image at all, but helping them to understand that they have a responsibility to this country where we can expect to develop the best of citizens who will conform with the law, adhere to everything else that is correct and upright. And that is my second question, sir.
I'd only want to open the batting on this one and then hand over to the Commissioner. The question of remuneration for members of the police force, police service, has always been a contentious one. You go back some years ago where a former Prime Minister made a comment which was translated into a slogan for the opposition where they said that he had contended that police weren't special. I'm sure you remember that particular episode. And then a former Prime Minister promised affordable housing for duty-free cars for police and teachers. And of course that never materialized. We are having challenges recruiting police officers. There's no doubt about it. But policing remains a good career, and we have, as they say, upped the public relations program to try to attract young police officers. Just on Wednesday, I met 2 fine young police officers. Well, they're trainees, and I know that from talking to them, they're very enthusiastic and looking forward to a successful career. Policing today is not what it was 20 years ago. We have police officers who are expected to be engaged in tackling cybercrime. They have to be good at a lot of things that former police of a bygone era don't have to be good at. They have to understand technology. They have to be able to crack a mobile phone and get into it and look for various things on social media. And in many respects, the career of policing is a lot more attractive now in terms of opportunities than it was before. But at the end of the day, people want to be able to pay their bills, they want to be able to pay their mortgages, they want to make their car payments. And so salaries are key. Our reality is that the matter of paying public servants and police officers form a part of that set is one which is not capable of being easily extracted and dealt with on its own. I can say that as part of the overall exercise of salary negotiations that has just concluded with the settlement, a regrading of all of the members of the public service has been promised within a year, and I anticipate that some of that will see some changes in the ranks of the police service. One of the things that have been mandated to consider in an effort to attract officers to the police service would be having individuals coming at at a guaranteed higher level so that somebody who comes in with certain special qualifications may come in at a higher rank than just a constable. So there are a number of things that we have to look at. It would help us greatly, though, if we could immediately make policing a more attractive career than in the past. I've been told that the police service has been losing officers to go to do a number of jobs that ordinarily, to go and do security jobs, for example. And when you dig deep, sometimes it might be the level of remuneration, but other times it's also the level of sacrifice that's required. You remember, I remember for St. Thomas that when we came to government in 2018 and found that gun crime was spiraling out of control, the then commissioner had to call in everybody from vacation. They had to call in everybody, they had to take back everybody's day off. Very few jobs require that level of sacrifice. We've known for a long time that the health profile of the average police officer is worse than the health profile of just about any other segment of the Barbadian society. And you know why? Because they don't get to eat regular meals. They have to work sometimes. When a police officer is on investigation, he can't say, well, boy, it's 4 o'clock, he gone. Can't say that, Commissioner?
No, you can't say it.
He has to continue until the investigation is at a point where he can leave. And then at 9 o'clock the next morning, he probably has to show up at the High Court to give evidence in the case. So there are a number of things that I would like us to be able to put on the table in due course. And it isn't just a question of salaries. There are other terms and conditions that we have to consider. Now we've given the police gyms and things of that sort to help to improve their health and so on. But we're also going to have, at some point in time, to address the issue of the retirement age. Now that is not a matter perhaps for today, but I remind this Honourable Chamber that members of the Barbados Defence Force will retire if you are below a particular rank at the age of 45. And if you reach the higher echelons, you have to go at 55 and you can possibly get an extension now, I think, to 60. Now, those are special arrangements that have been put in place for the BDF. And the time has come when as a government, we have to look to see what other things we can do to make policing a more attractive career. For my part, as Attorney General, I commit to giving them every possible training opportunity, because if we train them, we don't just train them for the service of the police service, but we train them for the entire community. I have no difficulty with our police officers pursuing tertiary education. They should, becoming accountants and lawyers and so on. These are all skills, becoming computer scientists, these are all skills that the service needs, and we recognize that at some point in time we may lose them. But every trained police officer is one who is a tremendous asset to the service. So I just want to summarize by saying salaries have always been an issue, they continue to be an issue. But we have to deal with it within the larger context of government. Secondly, we have to look at other non-salaried items. There's going to be a regrading coming. And thirdly, in the long term, we have to think about the future of the service and seriously addressing the fact that a police officer could well be a police constable and looking to retire at age 67. Now, which pickpocket he is going to be able to run down Broad Street at Yuletide season? So there are some other things that we have to look at. If I, with your permission, can I invite the Commissioner of Police to comment briefly?
Thanks, Chair. The aspect of the cadet program that you made mention of, that is a worthwhile undertaking for us. And what is being done currently, that we are in partnership with the Advanced Youth Corps, who that organizes the young persons into the program to bring them up through a certain level of understanding and prepare them for advancement. And what we've done, we've had those meetings which what would happen, they would create a program within their program for persons who are inclined to come into the service. In that program, we would then provide the resources that would train them up for that transition period when the time comes to enter the Barbados Police Service to become full police officers. So yes, that is a work in progress, and is as it stands now, it is going quite well for us.
My final query, sir, or comment. I believe that we are at the stage where we have the various agencies and the technology to help to walk the country through a lot more of what the police force does. The police service does. So that people will get a better understanding, because a lot of young people feel that the police is only lick and lock up. And I believe that it is critical at this time for us to talk them through. We've got the various media fora that we can use to be able to make the difference. We are all concerned about the spiraling crime. I hardly go anywhere at night and I'm a fat girl. So you would understand and appreciate, Mr. Chairman, the kind of challenges that persons are having. I would say I'm a brave little girl. But I have a difficulty in understanding what is happening. And I would want to be in a better position to be able to talk to those persons who approach me or chat with us to say, what are their concerns? And a lot of people are extremely concerned about the protection of citizens who may have witnessed incidences of crime, shootings and stabbings and murders and so on. And I would like to know what are the plans for the protection of witnesses, even jury members who are exposed in this very small society, wanting to do the best they can to help this country, but then they're being targeted by criminals and threatened in their homes and on the phone and so on, if they go to court and say anything and say they see them. Small society, everybody knows everybody else. Nowadays it is wrong, but sometimes we're seeing persons who are on the scenes of murders and serious accidents, and before the accident could happen or the incident could occur, it's up on the media, and then it drives the fear in the heart of persons who are associated. Many more people would like to come forward. There are times that I know things that I would like to share too, but then I'm not always comfortable with which police officer with whom I can speak to say I've observed. Because then people say, oh, you can't talk to the police because they tell the other people that it's you that tell them and that kind of thing. I live in rural Barbados, and I don't think that rural Barbados has that kind of as serious a situation as urban Barbados, where people are closely knit in their households and so on, and in the communities. And so I want to know what is being done to be able to advise the public generally as to what is doing for witness protection and so on, because you don't want to lose your family members, or you don't want to lose your own life because you witnessed something because you were in perhaps the wrong place at the wrong time, and the people recognize it was you, and then they say, no, I don't want that information to go out, I don't want the police to find out that she saw me and I pulled the trigger, or I kicked the person, or I used the knife, whatever. What kinds of plans are there for us, the public, who wish to work with the law enforcement agencies, to be able to know how can we be protected if we are witnesses, or if we reach out to say, I have been threatened by so-and-so who is a gangster anyhow, and then I don't even know how to come out of my house. I just have to stay in the little doors I live in, praise my God. I would like to find out what plans there are, please, for the public to rest assured, yes, we have systems in place for your protection.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I begin this response by saying that this is the thin edge of the wedge, really. From the point of view that if we don't have witnesses, then there's no opportunity for justice. But equally, we will only be able to secure the cooperation of witnesses if, as witnesses, they are satisfied that they will come to no harm and that they have confidence in the system, even at the investigation stage, that information that they might disclose is going to be treated sensitively and that they and their information are going to be protected. But the point is, it's this equation has two sides. We can't get justice unless we have witnesses, and for that we require public education. You hear it every day. If you see something, say something. You hear us castigating those members of the society who have information but who refuse to come forward. Sometimes they refuse to come forward out of fear. At times they refuse to come forward because they're complicit, because they made themselves benefit from the wrongdoing that we see is going on. So we must have witnesses, we must have the support of the public in this regard. But on the other hand, I accept, Honourable Member, that we're not going to get that support unless people are confident that they and sometimes their identity is going to be protected. Now, I will say to you that some things are done in limited ways. We've had instances where individuals have had to get the benefit of special security arrangements before, but that would be the extreme end of the spectrum. But in terms of, and you specifically said witness protection several times, we don't have a witness protection program in Barbados. We don't. There are efforts across the region to put things of that sort in place, but that is very nascent. That has not yielded any fruit as yet. So witness protection, as we will see on television, as you will see when you watch your movies, is not something that is available in our society. But we already do a number of things. In the course of trials and in other situations as confidence building measures and as measures to secure the fearless support of witnesses. I have to be very careful how I speak because we do want to protect the integrity of the system, but sometimes something as simple as being able to give evidence without actually physically coming to court is something that we have had in the past. And so that is part of our lived experience. We have had in criminal cases with situations where people do not physically come to court, but they still give their evidence. We've had situations with rape victims, for example, especially involving minors, where the person who has suffered the indignity sometimes can't bear to relive the experience in the presence of the assailant. And so we've had instances where they've been allowed to give evidence in another room, but connected to the court by video. Remember always, though, that the question of rights always has appended to it the benefit. And so while witnesses have the right to be protected, one of the fundamentals of our legal system has always been that the accused must be able to face his accuser. Because it would be anathema for our legal system to accept a situation where somebody could allege a serious crime against you, but doesn't have to come forward and make themselves available for cross-examination and so on. So it is not a simple situation. In summary, we don't have witness protection in Barbados, as you would see on television, but there have been successful efforts to protect witnesses in circumstances where they feel legitimately that they are at risk in some way, or where they may even be at risk of additional trauma. We've been able to offer protection to our witnesses, sometimes through giving testimony outside of the room, but connected by Zoom and so on. So it is a complex issue. In our small society, the approaches that other large societies might be able to take are not relatively easily available to us. But certainly, I am happy that Barbadians still have enough confidence in the system that that the situation that worries you has not become prevalent.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Thomas. Honourable Member for St. Michael West.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the Office of the Attorney General. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Honourable Attorney General for unwittingly providing light moments for me and others, I'm sure, in the dark times of COVID, for what he described as being the face of memes, especially the brandy and I can't say the other thing. I won't abuse my parliamentary privilege here. But I also want to thank him for his continued commitment to the cause of maintaining law and order and his steadfast leadership in the office. And also thank him for standing up along with the Office of the Commissioner of Police to face the music as it pertains to the ever-evolving crime situation in this country. So thank you, sir. I'd also like to congratulate the Honourable Minister, who is now responsible for crime prevention, my colleague from the City of Bridgetown. And I don't see this as a redundancy to the Barbados Police Service, but an entity that strengthens our hand and plays an important role in captaining the involvement of many ministries in our fight against deviancy and crime in this country. Now, my honourable colleague from St. Thomas beat me to my first question, so I just want to echo her sentiments that I believe that our policemen need better remuneration, better working conditions, and training. This will go a long way in improving their mental health and assuaging any morale concerns. So, Chair, I only have two questions. My first question is from my honourable colleague from the City of Bridgetown. Most of the murders and most of the major gangs hail in the urban areas, including the City of Bridgetown and the urban areas and constituency of mine as well. How do you, sir, manage the roles of the minister responsible for crime prevention and the MP for the city, given that context? And can you comment on any socio-economic issues that contribute to rising crime that you've seen as your time as the MP of the City of Bridgetown?
Thank you, well, Honourable Member, for that question. The first part of the question is quite simple in that it is, the two roles are almost the same. As I see my role as the MP for the city multifaceted, but one of the main roles is really helping people. And how do you help people? You help them by empowering themselves to help themselves on a continuous and sustained basis. So if I am going to help lift the City of Bridgetown to higher and higher heights, it is really, the job is really one and the same in relation to what I was doing before in relation to empowerment, making sure that we can treat to the economic enfranchisement of the people to ensure that they're empowered financially. And now in relation to crime prevention, I see it almost the same way in areas that we have that are deemed high-risk areas, to continue to work with each and every individual, each and every constituent, to be a part of the solution and not be a part of the problem. So daily when I walk, I am really walking in two lanes. The first lane is as MP to assist, and the second lane is in receiving, working with persons on understanding the culture, understanding the programs that are required, and making sure that those programs are implemented. In the second area, one of the things that I said before and I want to reiterate is that sometimes we make this dividing line between urban and rural. But when you take a helicopter view of Barbados and understand we're 166 square miles, we are really one at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I believe that everyone in this chamber and everybody listening here right now would have gone to school with somebody from every parish in Barbados, would have relatives, would have friends, platonic and otherwise, from all areas, north, south, east, and west of Barbados. So for me, I really see it as a situation where we continue to work with empowering the people in a meaningful way to ensure that they see less of a need to commit crime. Now, a lot of the times that we talk about crime, we talk about poverty. And I cannot, and no one can really realistically deny that poverty is a factor in crime, in the commission of crime. But it is more complex than that. Because when you look on the streets of Barbados, when you look at crimes that have been perpetrated in this land, when you look at the type of weaponry that we've seen in this country before, when you look at drug landings in this country, those are not the sole remit of poverty. Poverty can't afford those things. So poverty is not the only factor, although it is a factor. Now, the other thing that I have seen as I've done my sociological studies throughout Barbados, the region, and further afield, is that Barbados is quite a unique place in relation to where we see these young and restless groups, that sometimes we give different names. But when you look at other places in the Caribbean, a lot of the crime is as a result of need, where in Barbados, you would recognize a lot of the crime is in result of greed. In other words, in other places of the world, you will see people committing robbery, burglary, and even homicides for money, to get something to eat. Where in parts of Barbados, you will see people committing crime for $600 pair of shoes, or to be able to go to the next event. No, that is not need. That is greed. That is something else. That is self-worth. That is self-value. That is a trauma, personal and collective trauma of some of our people. Now, as you would appreciate, many of us in here have different thresholds for physical pain. And the same could be said about emotional pain. So sometimes people like to poo-poo the trauma of individuals because people say, I walked that walk and they didn't do that. But your threshold for pain is different to somebody else. So it's really understanding these socio-economic realities to understand what are the root causes. Because if we don't understand the root causes, we cannot solve the problem. So that is why it is important that we've talked about the activities and so on, but included in this program is a number of training programs, because we've looked at it A, B, C. People talk about just giving people employment, but if they're mining right, they can't stay in that employment. They can't thrive in that employment. So that's why we have programs looking at parenting, training, trauma, release, counseling, to get the mind right. And then to provide requisite training and retooling, and then to provide the empowerment through employment, entrepreneurial activities, etc., etc. So A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. That is really how we are planning to attack the situation.
Thank you. For my second question, Chair. Honourable members in the House passed the Firearms Amendment Act, which calls for harsher penalties on gun crime. Obviously a welcome step. However, I would like to address somewhat the elephant in the room, where some Barbadians believe that if you were to use a chess analogy, that a lot of the individuals who will be affected by these harsher penalties will be considered the lesser pieces on the chessboard. What are we going to do about the bishops and the kings and the castles? What is the strategies to go after the exporters and the importers of illegal guns?
Thank you, Honourable Member. You know, of course, that there are matters relating to strategy and policing that I'm not at liberty to discuss, not even in this chamber. But I want to, and I'll ask the commissioner to come in, but I want to assure members of this chamber that as I pursue my responsibilities as Attorney General, and I know that as the commissioner pursues his as Commissioner of Police, that there are no sacred cows. If you break the law, we will find you and we will deal with you. If you are a king or a queen, it may be that you may consider yourself to be a little bit insulated or a little bit further out of reach. But the tools of modern policing are such that we have the ability to get to you, and rest assured that we will be getting to you. You know, there's that old saying, what ain't catch ain't past you yet. Okay? So let me serve warning that if there are people who believe that for some reason they are above the law, I said for some reason, whatever that reason is, that is not a concept that is known to this Attorney General, this Prime Minister, or National Security Council, the Commissioner, or any of our law enforcement agencies. No one will be beyond the reach of law enforcement. Commissioner?
Thanks, Chair. Like my line minister, Attorney General, we in the Barbados Police Service also can reassure the public that our duties, our functions will continue unabated. In fact, we'll be more engaged and involved in trying to get every weapon out of the hands of the criminals. And wherever our investigations lead us, wherever our evidence lead us, wherever our information comes from, once it is checked out and proved to be solid, then we will move in the direction of those areas which were identified. And I will repeat that no one is exempted from the actions and interventions of the work of the police in bringing these situations under control. Likewise, our tactics will be utilized in the best form and fashion to have this problem addressed. So yes, the harsher penalties are there for the courts to impose, but it is our job to prevent crime, detect crime, and put all offenders before the court. And that is our remit, and we will stick to that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Michael West. Thank you, Honourable AG and team. Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Chair, members of the team for the AG's office. I just want to commend the AG for the work he has done as it relates to one of the most dynamic ministries in this country. And I said dynamic in an elasticized way because in terms of the response to the ever-changing needs of crime, I want to say that in order for we to be able to have that fit for purpose response, you need to have the active player and participants. And I want to commend the AG for marshalling the troops in a special way at his ministry. And when I talk about change, I remember the days when there was a fight in my neighborhood, and I'm still a relatively young man. There wear big rocks as the weapon of choice. I remember those days. AG probably remember them too. I remember the days they took up a stick and hit a man with it. The change that we see today is guns and bullets. I really remember the days, well, I don't remember the days, but in the 1940s, 50s, we had we call the candlestick phone as the phone of choice. Nowadays, we have cell phones that could probably light a candle. The change in technology. The AG alluded in his opening statements to the fact that the police have to be ever conscious when they're going to fight crime, that some person may just take a clip, just a simple clip, not the whole video of the event, a clip, and then try to put the police in a negative light. My first question has to do with the Computer Misuse Act. And that was probably started in the year 2004, 2005. And it made special reference to penalties for persons who feel that because of some special flippancy, that there can disparage persons' names, their families, their children, whatever you call it, probably friends, enemies, in such a way that that person suffers abnormal stress and embarrassment. It has become the norm in Bajan society. My constituents complain about it. They have asked me to be able to vocalize my abhorrence against this type of behavior. And we are saying that there is a law called the Computer Misuse Act. I want to know if you AG feel that this law is fit for purpose, knowing full well that persons continue to be involved in miscreant behavior across the social medias. And I really want to talk about it because I have said already in this August chamber that at the scene of accident, rather than call the police and try to lend assistance, the first thing a person would do is, the new norm is to take out your cell phone so you can get hits on social media and foolishness. And so I'm saying, how can we improve the law, change regulations, whatever, to now tighten the Computer Misuse Act and to ensure that the behaviors that seek to destroy people in this society, that becomes a thing of the past. That's my first question.
Thank you, Honourable Member. There's a long-standing tradition in the Chamber that you must not speak of legislation that is still to come. And I will not breach that rule. The Clerk of Parliament will encourage the Chair to eject me from this Chamber. However, I can say to the Honourable Member that the matter of computer misuse, that was the euphemism that we had back in the day. We used to call it computer misuse. But computer misuse has gone way beyond computer misuse and has become full-blown crime, both domestic and transnational. And therefore, the Computer Misuse Act is not in need of amendment, it is in need of repeal. I can say to you that we have a draft computer misuse bill that will shortly be receiving the attention of Cabinet, and I anticipate that in the not too distant future, a new piece of legislation will be brought to this chamber and delivered to Barbados, which will make the Computer Misuse Act a thing of the past. What will this new bill look at? We will deal with a number of other specific and general offenses. We'll be dealing with people who break into critical information and structure systems. We'll be dealing with people who disclose access codes wrongly. We'll be dealing with people who commit computer-related forgery or computer-related fraud. We'll be dealing with people who commit child pornography. We will even be introducing new offenses of something called grooming. And specifically, we're talking about child grooming. Grooming is when you try to encourage a particular individual along a particular line through communicating with them and manipulating them in order to abuse them. So in other words, you tell them how beautiful they are, how nice they are, what a nice dress you're wearing, what a nice shirt you're wearing, and so on, and you cajole them and you get them to the place where then you can abuse them sexually or otherwise. So that is also going to feature prominently in the legislation. And then malicious communication, dealing with people who use a computer system to publish or transmit data. So when people transmit pornographic videos or pornographic photographs, when people threaten to use violence, a whole set of those things. Sorry, sir, I just had to cough. We will also be addressing cyberbullying, cyber terrorism, and then people who aid or abet any of those things. So I want to assure the honourable member that we recognize the gravity of the situation. The social media and the mobile phones that we have are really wonderful devices, but they are now being used as instruments of oppression. They're being used as instruments of negativity and tactics of the worst possible kind. Mr. Chairman, I got a message from a constituent of mine this morning, and I don't know why. I think I missed something, but his message was, why you don't pass a law why you all don't make a law against the school children that fighting and against the people who are taping the fights? No, I don't know that we could pass a law against school children fighting, but perhaps we ought to pass a law against the people who, rather than stopping the fight, taping it to do what? To send around to their friends and things of that kind. These, so while we talk about computer misuse in perhaps highly technical senses, or computer or cybercrime in highly technical ways, these are things that almost instinctively, almost intuitively, members of the Barbadian public perceive as being wrong, and they perceive them as being wrongs that need a redress from Parliament. So I can assure the honourable member that very shortly, the Minister responsible for Innovation, Science and Technology will be seeking the approval to have the draft bill looked at by the Chief Parliamentary Council and then brought to this chamber in the shortest possible order, and I commit the resources of the Chief Parliamentary Council to make sure we get it here. It is a dreadful, dreadful thing to recognize that in a place there are adults, and instead of doing what would have happened years ago, part in the fight, instead of that kind of intervention, they're viewing it as a spectacle for their entertainment. What kind of example are we setting?
Thank you. I'm happy to know that we are looking at it. My second question, the environmentalists in my ministry, would you give me some, as the AG would say, some lists if I didn't ask this question? This is something that has bedeviled me as Minister of the Environment. It has to do, and I guess that the Commissioner of Police could answer this question for me, where persons, and this have happened since probably Adam was a lad, were caught dumping illegally. I really have to speak about it. Dumping illegally in Barbados. And for some reason, and I'm going to say, I as minister, I have shared photos, videos with members of the the police service in order to not only apprehend, but bring these persons before the law court so justice could be served. Under the Health Services Act, there is provision for that, where a person who is found guilty can be charged $5,000 and or with the alternative of 12 months in prison. I know it because...
I'm sorry, but the honourable member just went into his own personal language there, and I did not understand any of the last 8 words he used.
Under the Health Services Act, and I will put it up. A person who contravenes these regulations is guilty of an offense and liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000 and imprisonment or for a term not exceeding 12 months or both. I am not lettered in the art of law, and I won't try to be. And in the case of a continuing offense, to a further fine not exceeding $200 for each day or their part thereof, during which the offense continues after a conviction is first obtained. This is under the Health Services Act. And I was just making reference to that particular act and saying that the environmentalists and the people that I have interacted with who are part of the group, the philanthropic group, that seeks to clean up the gullies across Barbados. There is a group who have donated cameras to my ministry in an attempt to be able to capture video footage of those who are dumping illegally. I went in the Member of Parliament for St. Thomas constituency one day, and in the next 2 days, the area was full of garbage illegally dumped. We had videos to suggest the persons that were doing it. We have sent those videos forward on more than one occasion. And the people are asking me as minister what is being done. Somehow, I don't know what happens from the time the report is made till the time that these persons are charged or whatever, but it seems that there is nothing being done in terms of bringing justice to this situation. I'm just asking, what is the process and why is it that it appears like nothing is being done for those persons who are contravening this law?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much, and I will ask the Commissioner to weigh in. I regrettably do not know the specifics of what the Honourable Member is referring to, and I would be grateful if he would share them with me at some point in time. The members of the Barbados Police Service are here to enforce the law. Their responsibility under Section 4 of the Police Act is to investigate and detect and investigate crime of any kind. I cannot say, and I leave it to the Commissioner to respond specifically, but I cannot say what the status of any particular investigation is. I know that people have in the past come to me with what they perceive as being evidence, and ask me to look into various things, and when I take a look at what it is, you can make out the car number and a whole variety of things. So I do not know, but I would like to suggest that the best thing to have done, instead of determining to put up cameras, would have been to put them up in conjunction with the members of the Barbados Police Service, because we actually have the capacity to monitor these cameras. We know what kinds of cameras give us the best resolution for the best kind of evidence and things of that sort. So I can commit that if there's a particular issue that we need to address, the resources of the police service will be available to do so. But I would be loath to agree that without more, that the police might be seen as being failing in some duty or another. Commissioner?
Thanks. The whole aspect of illegal dumping or flight tipping, as some person refer to it, is we in the service see it as a grave health hazard. And every opportunity, every occasion that we get to intervene, whether we see it while passing or while executing our duties, or whether some person call in, tell us our information just come by us by some means or fashion. We always respond to it and take the necessary action. And we encourage persons that anytime they see such instances occurring, to let us know. And once we have received that information, I can assure the minister that the members of the Barbados Police Service will take the necessary action to have it brought under control. Now, if there are any areas, location, where these things are occurring, then I would encourage everyone to give us that information, whereby we can have the patrols pass through those areas, and also work with probably persons who own these properties, and have that type of relationship with those persons so that we can advance the reaction or intervention of having this thing totally stamped out. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say that, as I said, this is a vexing concern for me. And I would ensure that I work closely with those members of the police service, because it is one Barbados at the end of the day, and I think that each citizen is duty bound to ensure that we keep our environment in a safe and pristine way, recognizing that there is not only an iconic song called Beautiful Barbados, but it was done by an idyllic group. So that's it for me, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central. Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Attorney General, I know that today you led the reported Law Reform Commission, June 2019 to December 2022. What salient things from that report do we expect to see acted upon over the next financial year? And do your allocations contemplate any of the recommendations in the report?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Let me begin, though, if you don't mind, by lauding the work of the Law Reform Commission, ably led by Sir David Simmons. Law reform is something that we've always approached in a piecemeal fashion. And the establishment of the Law Reform Commission is the first attempt that we've ever made to having a systematic review of all of our laws from time to time, but also to consider new areas to see if there are areas in which we should consider passing legislation or which might require legislative attention. The Commission has done a tremendous amount of work since being established. They have given us amendments to the Firearms Act. They've given us amendments to the Minor Offences Act, which dealt with the kite flying, the Cybercrime Act that we expect to have very shortly. That's something that they will be able to take credit for. In a substantially reworked or an almost new Copyright Act, they've also looked at, and they've looked at it in difficult times during COVID, especially during COVID, when there was not the best opportunity for the members to function. In terms of our allocation, this particular agency has never had a large budget. I think they probably get, find out exactly how much they get. But they have been able to work very well, utilizing the resources that they have. Members will be aware that the Commission is made up largely of attorneys at law who are very well regarded in fact, I think almost entirely of attorneys at law who are very well regarded in their respective spheres of corporate law, criminal law, the law of equity, the law of contract, and so on. Yes. The amount of money that they've been given is considered to be enough for them to carry out their mandate. $875,000, that will cover salaries and a variety of other things. One of the important things about the way this Law Reform Commission works is that it does a lot of the heavy lifting itself. The members actually roll up their sleeves and look into specific areas of law and come up with the recommendations, and sometimes even do a bit of drafting. But in specialized areas such as cybercrime, such as copyright, they've had sufficient funds in their budget so that they are able to contract out those services. The work plan for the coming year is an ambitious work plan. They have a number of programs that they want to look at. They're going to be working with us on such things as organ donors and euthanasia and things of that sort. Those things, that's already been drafted, and they're going to be doing a review of that. But I can say that the funds that we've allocated are not allocated towards a specific project, but are allocated towards them doing such legislative instruments as they consider to be important. I know that they're going to be working on a new legal professions bill. They're also going to be working on a freedom of information bill, something that has been cried out for many years, and something that we really, let me just say that we have indicated our support for that. They're also going to be looking at modernizing the Evidence Act, and they're also going to be looking at some elements of victims' rights and restorative justice. This commission will never have enough money to do its work. The laws of Barbados are amended or enacted based on the policy direction of the executive. But if you take, for example, the Companies Act, which we passed in 1979, and have amended numerous times, but have not sat down to look at how company law has changed en masse since then. If you look at the Law of Property Act, passed in 1975, the Family Law Act, passed in 1975, I think that was too. These are all seminal pieces of legislation that broke away from what we did following UK norms after 50, 60 years. But 50 years have passed. And in some instances, we've been left way behind modern legal or jurisprudential thinking. In some instances, we just need to catch up. And so while I honestly wish that we had more resources available to them, that we could do more, because there's a lot to be done, but the fact is that we can only do as much as we can consume. It's like food, you can only eat so much. We have to go through the legislative process, and laws, when enacted, then have to be absorbed by the people who have to use them. I remember when the Companies Act came into force. I was a young law student, and it was new, and it took quite some time before the people who were using it, before the legal profession could begin to grapple with all that it required and all that it was bringing with it. So we want them to have more, but unfortunately, I think that the work program that they have is more than ambitious, and it will yield significant results for us. But for them to do more would require a tremendous amount more resources, and then of course, the society has to absorb what they produce. So I'm happy with the work that they've done, and I look forward to the work product that they come up with during this financial year.
Mr. Commissioner, we passed the amendments to legislation. We had a new Firearms Act that came into force on the 1st of January, I believe, this year. There's been a lot of talk about the government getting a lot tougher on violent crimes. I know that you had the joint patrols with the BDF, and you had a number of policies aimed at bringing the crime rate down. Are you satisfied with the results of the efforts so far, and what, if anything, do you believe is needed to actually take it a step further? I guess one depends on the next one.
With your leave, Mr. Chairman, I will ask the Commissioner to answer that question. I believe it was properly directed to the Attorney General. Mr. Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman. Now, the question which was asked by the Honourable Member is one which is very of high importance to the organisation, I must say. It is one which we look at a situation of serious matters, gun violence, which is, as mentioned before, a health hazard to the country. And the whole rollout of Operation Restore Order, it is one which combined the resources of the Barbados Police Service and the Barbados Defence Force to deal with a threatening situation which threatens the livelihood, the well-being, health and safety of members of the society. And the numbers which were put in that unit, over 80 persons formed that unit. And it was formed in such a way that it would bring tremendous success, and the outcome of the project would be very telling in terms of its operability, one, and the whole outcome structure of it. Now, its rollout for us has been exceedingly successful. The successfulness of it is borne out in tangible results. And those results stretch not only from recovery of number of firearms, number of rounds of ammunition, number of stop and searches, that is vehicles, and also searches of persons in general. And the success of it, the biggest part of it is one thing. The level of fear and anxiety that was being created by that form of activity, that is the lawless activity of firearms misuse. That was calmed tremendously in our interaction with members of the public. They told us that they were feeling a lot more secure and were willing to go about their duties, the forms of leisure or whatever it was, in a much more relaxed frame of mind. And it came on board late November into the Yuletide season and also into the New Year, a season which is now characterized with a lot of activities, nightlife and what else. So persons were able to go about all of those functions, All Year's Night, fests, whatever, in a relaxed frame of mind, because they noticed, not the police, the high visibility of persons from the Restore Order were moving around. Little inconvenience for persons when it comes to the stop and the searches, things like that, and motor cars and things like that. But the main thing, the targeting of persons who were creating the type of discomfort, the uncomfortable situations for persons who were moving around. Yes, there were persons who, for one reason or the other, would have had some form of sympathy for the persons who were creating this type of situation. by the end, we stuck to our guns, not really looking at what the bad people were doing, but we stuck to our guns and we had the situation brought under control. And the situation, the calmness, and the operation that was being put on continue into the new year. And it is ongoing. It's a job which will have to be sustained as long as possible. Yes, the persons who are involved, yes, we commend them for the efforts which they are putting into it and what they are doing for, not only for the organization, but the bigger picture is for the country in general. So the results are there for everyone to see. And at some point, we will have to review its operation, whether or not it would have outlived its life. And if need be, we would have to recalibrate it in such a way that we would make sure that we do not give up any grounds that we have captured, that we maintain the focus of the operation. So those things will continue, no doubt, because it is a very dynamic situation, and we know that if we pull back, things can go awry. So it is need to maintain that strong footing, that intent, which will go forward in times to come.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair, through you to the AG. AG, I must commend you. I must commend you, your department, on what has been a dizzying legislative agenda. I don't think that this much legislative changes and adjustments and modernizations have happened in recent time. It has been a lot. I know you've often complained that the ability to do even more has been stymied by the lack of resources, especially in terms of legislative drafters, which is a highly specialized field. I know that there's a backup of some legislation that we want to get out that is backed up solely because you don't have the manpower and sufficient manpower or technical expertise to actually push off the backlog that you have. I'm just wondering, AG, what is the position for this year? What is in place to put resources into the SGs and CPC's chambers to be able to catch up with the ambitious targets that we've set and to push off the things that are pending in the queue for drafting? So all that to say is I commend you entirely. You've done a lot. I know there's a lot more that we want to do, but I just want to know what is in the kitty to actually help us to get there.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Let me give you an example of what the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel has to deal with. And remember something that both myself and the Solicitor General mentioned when we were talking about the attorneys in chambers in relation to expertise. While we pride ourselves in our ability to produce legislation, expertise in specialized areas can sometimes be a challenge. Then sometimes that expertise is required. The ministry responsible for the blue economy urgently requires a suite of maritime legislation which will be, when you add them all together, will be certainly over 1,500 pages long. Now, it doesn't just require you to have a knowledge of maritime law, but it also requires you to have that very, very specialized skill of legal drafting. Now, there was an individual who recently announced that he drafted a piece of legislation, and I pay him great credit for it. But this is now my second go-around as Attorney General, and I know that drafting legislation is nowhere near as simple as putting words together. And we have 300 and something pieces of legislation in our collection of laws, And the same word must mean the same thing in every single one of those statutes. So somebody has to check it and make sure that it means exactly that. And if it is to have a nuanced meaning, it has to be defined precisely and so on. Now, we've been asked to produce that legislation for Barbados because it enables us to reach certain international standards. But we simply don't have, yes, we have the manpower, but it is such specialized legislation that for if we put all of our lawyers together and ask them to do it, it is doubtful that they'll be able to come up with a product that would pass muster. So we've had to direct the Ministry of the Blue Economy to seek an expert in the area who has drafted legislation in that area before for other countries from within the Commonwealth. So that is one of the methods that we are going to be using and that we have used in order to be able to produce highly specialized instruments, statutory pieces of statute, so as to be able to meet the demands of line ministries. In addition to that, we have recently, through the Office of the Clerk of Parliament, reached out to the clerks of the UK Parliament. Now, in the UK, their legal drafting is not done by the office of their Attorney General or Crown Solicitor, or whatever it is. Their drafting is usually done by their Parliament. And I think the same thing pretty much happens in Trinidad, where the drafting is done by Parliamentary Council. And in fact, I think it would immediately strike you that, that is why they're called Parliamentary Council, not because they draft laws going to Parliament, but because traditionally they are actually seen as part of the parliamentary staff. And we reached out to the clerk of the UK Parliament and pointed out to them that we were going to urgently need drafting expertise across a whole range of specialized areas. And I believe that we've got about 9 or 10 responses, some from sole practitioners, others from firms, who are willing and able to do drafting for us. So we now have to sift through that to see if they've drafted our kinds of laws before, and if they fit our bill. The reality, though, is that this is an area that challenges not just Barbados, it challenges the entire Commonwealth. I remember meeting the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Dame Baroness Scotland, and you know, she said, AG, don't ask about legal draftsmen. I said, well, that's exactly what I've come to ask for. But there's a dearth of that particular skill across the Commonwealth. We have put in our professional vote monies to allow us to buy in drafting services. We currently do buy in drafting services, I think you'll be aware. And we have to do it because there are times when you require legislation urgently. But equally, you cannot always take the staff of the chief parliamentary councils off of what they're doing to deal with particular issues. So 3 or 4 years ago, you might recall, we had to deal with a whole suite of companies legislation and turn it around within about 4 or 5 weeks. So we had to bring in 2 people. Happily, though, both those individuals were very well regarded drafters who were available locally to do that kind of specialized work. And while they were paddling away on that, it allowed the Chief Parliamentary Council to steadily continue to work on the drafting program that they have. In the year ahead, and in fact, in the short term and the long term, we have a very ambitious legislative program. You see, even though we may hire a maritime draftsman from overseas to draft the law, the many laws and regulations that are required on shipping for us, the Chief Parliamentary Council still then has to read exactly what they say and measure them for consistency in language consistency with our norms and consistency with our practices. So even though it gets drafted overseas, they still have to pour over it for many, many dozens of hours so as to make sure that when we do pass it, it is a seamless fit with the laws that we have on our books and the laws that we intend to pass. We have a very ambitious legislative agenda going forward. There are a number of things that are in train. But equally, there are a lot of emerging areas that we have to consider, and I anticipate that we are going to continue to need assistance from counsel outside of chambers, whether within Barbados or whether overseas, but I can give the chamber my assurance that we will be up to the task of producing the amount of legislation that this chamber requires. But as a member of the executive, you would know that there's a lot of legislation to come down the pipeline. We have to consider such things as a new Education Act, and that's going to be a major undertaking. We have to do a tremendous amount of drafting in the short and medium term, but we will get it done, and to the extent that we need resources from outside of chambers, as I said, whether locally or whether from overseas, those are available to us, so that we can satisfy the requirement of the government of Barbados. Thank you.
For my second question, Chair, I just wish to wrap up, just make a final statement, very, very brief, just to say, as I alluded to, that this office has done a lot, and your ministry has actually done a lot, AG, in what has been a very difficult time to push the agenda of the government to look at legislative reforms, and actually the police have actually stepped up majorly to the plate to try to secure Barbados. So I just wish to state for the record that I think the efforts of your ministry are worthy of congratulations, and you have our full support, and I look forward to bigger and better in the next financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch East. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, wish to commend the Attorney General and his staff, essentially for the legislative agenda which this ministry has put out, and of course is being complicated even more by what struck Barbados and indeed the world 3 years ago, and the need for all the COVID legislation and national emergency laws and the regulations fall in there, and it was not an easy task. Errors were made, but then there's no perfection in drafting legislation, especially when it is in a hurry. But it brings me to the first point, and I'll lead on from where the last honourable member started as well on law reform, and to also again use this opportunity to commend the Law Reform Commission, which has been established for the work it has done in terms of paying for and retaining a legal consultant, extremely brilliant Caribbean person, to draft the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill, which we've had since December, and of course we're waiting the National Policy on Disabilities document as well, which we now have, and by the end of this month to formally submit both to the Parent Ministry of People's Empowerment for onward consideration by the Cabinet, and with the bill obviously having final overview by the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel. So that alone shows the worth of the Law Reform Commission. The truth is, Mr. Chairman, that a lot of our laws are outdated. I mean, there were some as much as almost 100 years old. So it is a task. A lot of our laws are pre-colonial times, and laws that England got rid of. England, from whom we took these laws, got rid of these laws long time ago. So this is a critical area that is required, and we've seen recently that the judiciary has struck down some laws at first instance, which, quite honestly, I suppose with more resources, the Attorney General's Department would have been able to review and to have brought amendments to Parliament on these laws and indeed abolish these laws rather than have the courts have to strike them down. But it leads me, Mr. Chairman, to my question, and in follow-on to earlier debate issue raised by the Honourable Member for St. Peter as to the need, certainly in my opinion, to transform the department of the Office of the Solicitor General. Again, I believe that this is a relic from colonial times, and I mean, this government, this administration is about transformation. And in my opinion, we can't continue with a department, as the Attorney General said, with 20 attorneys at law advising all, or certainly the vast majority of government departments with the resources it has. And within the context of what the Attorney General described, yes, some people are going to be on sick leave, some on holiday, some transferred tomorrow to be a magistrate to another government department. And the time is long come, Honourable Attorney General, whereby, in my opinion, each ministry has its own legal department. The Ministry of Education should have its own attorneys at law and should not have, for example, to ask for legal opinions from the Solicitor General's office. There's nothing fundamental which we cannot change by way of legislation to allow for that. And it's just too much on the Office of the Attorney General with its resources for this to be allowed to continue much longer. And yes, there's some ministries that have their own lawyers. We know that. I think Public Works might have one or two. Housing has the statutory corporations. Some of them have, but it can't be a case within what we are seeking to achieve where we continue to place this full burden on the Solicitor General's chambers. I know about it because 40 years ago,
Honourable Member,
to ask the question. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will lead to the question, sir.
You are now at 5 minutes. Please proceed.
So,
Thank you.
Attorney General, you spoke about alternatives, possibly, the good and the bad, but isn't this an option as well, whereby each ministry could have, certainly the major ministries and departments could have their own legal department, such that they don't have to go to the Solicitor General's office for legal opinions and advice?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member for St. James North. I suppose we agree that we do need to have some reform, though I think the reform that we're thinking of may look a little different to the one being described by yourself. There's an extent to which decentralizing legal services is a good thing, but our challenge is that there are some deficits that come along with it. And if I can, as a senior lawyer, you deal with many juniors in your own practice. And one of the things that you would be concerned about is the breadth of experience that those lawyers bring to the table. I remember remarking to someone only this morning that sometimes the best person to do an opinion on a contract is a person who is accustomed to doing litigation. Because as a litigator, they have had to think on their feet, spot so many things, turn things upside down, dissect them, and so on. You acquire legal skills in many ways. The risk of having a decentralized system where a person goes and works in the legal department of a particular ministry, in my respectful submission, the risk is that that individual is likely to develop certain deficits that present challenges. If you think for a moment about the lawyers at one or two of our statutory corporations, because of the nature of their work, they have no litigation experience. So they approach legal problems in a clinical way rather than approaching it with the eye of a litigator who will assess it a little differently. So in my view, I accept that we need reform. I think that going in the direction that you're describing is not one that readily appeals to me. Of course, I would have less lawyers to supervise at the end of the day. But I think that we need to have lawyers with a greater breadth of experience, and we have to make sure that they're all adequately trained, that we have consistent standards, and that they are able to address the legal issues that come before them in a comprehensive way. So I would respectfully suggest that while there is opportunity for change, I don't know if I'm entirely supportive of the idea that every ministry will have its own lawyers. I think that there's more than enough in common that a centralized approach would benefit from. And if you think, for example, of a complex contract, I would prefer very much to have the bird's eye view of a multidisciplinary chambers addressing the issue than the narrow focus of a lawyer, perhaps who has only ever done maritime affairs, but who is responsible for approving a contract for $20 million in dredging. So I accept that we need reform, but I respectfully suggest that I would want to go in a slightly different direction.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, my second intervention relates to the Magistrate's Court, and I think that is sub-program 249 under program 242. And as has been said earlier in this debate, a lot of the work in terms of the judiciary is done in the Magistrate's Court. A tremendous amount of it, even though, of course, the Magistrate's Court, in my opinion, again, the time is long gone past to increase the jurisdiction of the magistrates to above 10,000. It's been that for God knows how long. Certainly when I became a lawyer, it was 10,000. And of course, 10,000 40 years ago is not $10,000 now. The magistrates may very well say they have enough work already. But computerization of the Magistrates' Court is very much needed because the Magistrates' Court has more people-to-people contact than the Supreme Court and affects the daily lives of people much more than does the Supreme Court. And of course, the office of the Registrar of the Supreme Court has bearing on this as well. But we had a situation early last year where in some magistrates' courts, you had difficulty getting payments that had been paid in cases defendants had, or persons who had judgment in their name had difficulty getting monies out because of who could sign the check and lack of officers on the whole. I think computerization could help in this case. I mean, I think most of the magistrates courts still operate under a card system, and I was just wondering if there are finances in the estimates for next year under this head for greater computerization of the court. I know that many officers who work in the courts as well are frustrated in this regard. And I must commend, sir, and not the acting registrar of the Supreme Court for assisting in this regard. And many lawyers feel the same way in resolving the issue of lack of resources in the Magistrates Court, over which the registry has oversight.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The situation in relation to the Magistrates Court is one that we are moving towards addressing. There are a number of things that are on the table, but you would appreciate that it is a moving, it is a constantly changing environment. So, for example, there is a significant discussion going on now about increasing the jurisdiction of the Magistrates Court, and I think you intimated that that is an option that's available to us. It would certainly reduce some of the work that is going towards the High Court. But while I think that that would be desirable, and there are a number of cases, especially criminal, that happen in the High Court in their continuous exercises that could well be done by magistrates without much effort and without the need to have a jury and so on. The reality is that that initiative would increase in one fell swoop the volume of work going to the Magistrates Court, which we've just agreed is already overburdened. So while I support the idea of increasing the jurisdiction of the Magistrates Court, both for civil and for criminal matters, I would urge that we have to deal with the Magistrates Court as it is today and resolve those issues. As it stands, there are thousands and thousands of cases in backlog in our Magistrates Court. It's as simple as that. Some civil, most criminal, some a significant amount of them in traffic. And the first job that we have to do, which we will begin to work on during the coming financial year, is to, and we know it in a political sense, we talk about cleaning the list. We have to begin by cleaning the list. There are cases, but let's put it this way, there are cases I had in the Magistrates Court as a young lawyer, and the people dead. But the cases are still treated as being in the Magistrates Court docket. And I'm sure you have similar experiences, especially where the claimant, for one reason or another, isn't going ahead anymore. So the first challenge that we have is to begin to clean the list. But given the nature of the Magistrates Court process, that is a very challenging exercise. The matter of computerization, we've already begun to computerize the magistrates' courts, but that is a work in progress. In relation to issues such as checks and so on, we're trying to get rid of the check system. In fact, the registrar will be able to tell you that in some instances, domestic matters, no checks are done. We don't pay out in cash, we don't pay out on check, money is credited directly to your bank account. I will agree, though, that it continues to be a source of some bother for litigants. One of the things that we simply have to address is that in some instances we have too few magistrates, and we also, so there's a need, I would respectfully suggest, for an increase in the number of magistrates, concomitant with an increase in the size of in the maximum jurisdiction. But we also have to address the issue of of the conditions in which they operate. You will know, for example, that some years ago we had to close Boarded Hall Court because it was inhospitable. District C Court also had to be closed. I'm very happy that we were able to open up the Fort Simmons complex on November 18th of last year, so as to be able to house the coroner and juvenile court magistrate. The chief magistrate is housed there, and we are currently engaged in fully refurbishing two of the older. You remember where the court was originally, the magistrate courts were originally. We'd hoped to move out of those completely, but we are having to refurbish two of those so as to make sure that the magistracy at District A has proper accommodation. The civil office at District A had to be closed because of the awful environmental conditions that they were working in. They now have a spanking new facility. So we do need to invest in the magistracy. And we need to do everything that we can to return our country courts to the country. I'm proud of what we have at District F. I was happy. I didn't get to open the building, but I did the groundbreaking and saw the construction start, so that the District F Magistrates Court is one that we can be proud of. But we don't have a District C. And you remember District C Magistrates Court. It was a tiny room under that, in the police station. What was District B Magistrates Court was little better than a hovel that judicial officers were required to work in. In fact, you could almost say those two courts were embarrassments. And if we're going to return our magistracy to the communities in the way in which it has traditionally been, we're going to have to make good on facilities. I can say there's been discussion going back 20 years now about a new a new civic facility in the area of 6 Roads, which we had intended would house a new modern magistrates court for District C, but that project has been deferred for the immediately foreseeable future. So there are a number of things that we have coming for the magistracy. I think that what we have done so far is an indication of our good faith, is an indication of our commitment. But to add to the burden of the magistracy by increasing their jurisdictions without dealing with the issues that affect them in terms of an increased size of the magistrates court bench, in terms of improved physical facilities, I think that we will have some challenges standing in our way. But I can say to you that I wholeheartedly agree that more has to be done. We are working on the technology platform, and I'm unable to say to the chamber what the timeline for that is, but it's a work in progress.
Thank you, AG. And Mr. Chairman, my final intervention. I'm going to tie in two concepts here. AG, you recently spoke on the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, and probably its underutilization by a lot of people in terms of trying to expunge their criminal record, and that is correct on that issue. So my first thing would be, is it on the cards for reformation or amendment to that act to make it easier for persons to be able to clean their record, or rather apply to clean their record? Because the approach some might feel may be a bit cumbersome and time-consuming for the ordinary citizen, and these are the people most affected by it, particularly in light of the fact that about 85% of the employers in Barbados, I would estimate, require a clean slate of record, police certificate of character for certain employment. And secondly, Honourable Minister of State the issue of parenting, the parenting program, which is, I believe, program 040 under sub-program 263 within this ministry, and the arts, because of course we won't have the opportunity for the other two associated ministries to be questioned in the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Youth Affairs during this exercise. What is the strategy in terms of that parenting program? Because this is fundamental. I think we would all agree to our development and the issue of the need for probably strategic interventions at some levels in terms of training for parents, and not only training for parents, but empowerment of parents as well, within the context of not only making them better parents, but making them more financially and economically independent, and giving Minister of State the opportunity to address on that issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member for St. James North. We did earlier discuss in some detail the workings and the program under the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. I do not agree with you that we need to make it easier for people to apply. In fact, the application is really, really very simple. It's an application form and you have to submit it along with references and so on. Expunging a person's record is a worthwhile gesture on the part of a state, but it is not one that should be made so easy that a person believes that they can, just march in and get a record expunged. I wouldn't support that particular approach at all. I would say, though, and I'm repeating it because it was said earlier, that I believe that there are some instances in which the justice of the case should allow for some discretion on the part of the committee, and so there's got to be a discussion on amendments, and the committee was invited by me back in 2000 to make a number, to look at the act and to make a number of recommendations, and to look at a number of areas that pose challenges to the working of the committee. And the chair of the committee has submitted a number of policy matters on which she wishes to get our advice as a cabinet, and those are matters that will be considered. I will therefore say I don't support making it easier. This is a very important thing, and with it should be a responsibility to complete the requirements, which are already not so onerous. And then finally, to repeat that I believe that we have to look to see how we can make it less of a rigid system, so that there may be instances where a person, while not falling within the four corners of the stipulations as they are currently enacted, could still have an opportunity to benefit from having the record expunged. I'll hand over to Minister Lane.
Thank you, AG, and thank you, Honourable Member for St. James North, for highlighting and underscoring what is deemed as one of the most important programs under this sub-program, and that is the targeting of parenting and the improvement of parenting throughout the society. I must admit that when I was assessing the programs across the landscape of Barbados, including government and non-governmental, one of my concerns really was in relation to duplicating effort. So, put quite bluntly, the Ministry of Youth Affairs has plans in place for parenting, the Ministry of Education, people empowerment. And then we have a national parenting program that was located between the last two ministries, People Empowerment and Education. And So what I'm saying now, we've actually have a very strategic focus going forward, because parenting can be divided into a number of areas. So as opposed to duplicating effort, what we're doing is looking at focusing on very strategic areas. So they have parent education and training, which in itself is two different things. One is highlighting to parents, strategies, things that we believe that they should know to be good parents. The other one is actually doing training sessions, which are already done by the Child Care Board and Parados in tandem. Parenting assistance and support, that is ensuring that those most vulnerable parents have the type of support systems, not only financial, but through counseling and psychosocial sessions. And so that would include things like counseling and so on. Parenting empowerment now, that takes it to a different level, where we're looking at working with parents and enable them to be able to work and be able to support themselves and their families in the long term. What the Prime Minister has asked me to do through this sub-program, however, is to look at a strategic area and make sure that the programs kind of gel with each other, and also to ensure that they are community-based. A lot of times we like to centralize programs, particularly as we've said all day in the urban areas, but what she's asked to happen is to make sure that every community in Barbados is touched with some type of community parenting program, which touch on all the different strategic areas that I mentioned before. So I want to actually thank you, Honourable Member, for reminding us and giving me the opportunity to underscore the importance of parenting in this particular sub-program. So I thank you very much. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. James North. Honourable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a layman, I'm going to answer a question, and I would really like the response from the police, from the AG, as well as the Minister of State that responsible for prevention of crime. Now, legislation has been passed in this House Assembly, and I have not had the opportunity to express my views on the legislation. I'm not asking for any reversal of decisions. I know it can't be done here, or I will have to move something in here in order for it to be done. But I am very concerned about legislation being brought to the House of Assembly that finds itself in a room where policymakers give directives rather than legislation coming before the House Assembly based on strong, unequivocal, empirical evidence. Now, I'm thinking about a specific piece of legislation which comes in conflict with a cultural practice that was over 2,000 years old. Simple, sounds simple, and probably it is best put under the title here of a Minor Offence Act. And there's a specific reason for bringing this under Minor Offence Act. And I believe I have a right to defend this as an encroachment on certain liberties that people experience for 2,000 years, and therefore it should never come here in a progressive modern House Assembly without the empirical evidence to support it. I want to ask the question, how many kites were seen in the sky in the midnight after 6 or 7 o'clock? Do you have evidence to support that? What was that? See or heard. You know how many? I know you probably know. How many was seen? I strongly believe that the office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel should always be provided with sound evidence, not based on any value judgment or anybody's personal experience, not on any value judgments. Empirical evidence should be produced and sent to this office strong evidence for us to draft any legislation. And more than that, I've been hearing that this drafting is a very complex challenge because of 3 major disciplines that you have to apply yourself to, recommendations being made, but passing off some of the drafting to even suggesting private attorneys. And I don't understand how this became such a priority, a fundamental priority that we put at the top of a table and hustle through this parliament. I strongly believe that in order for these biases or value judgment not to be applied, that there's a necessity for stronger autonomy in the hands of the chief parliamentary group, and we can see it mirrored in the provisions within the Act that you had a justification for doing what you did. That is my concern. I'm going to ask now this. Oh, I haven't asked anything yet. I'm going to ask this. Well, okay. I'm going to ask this. Tell me how the police officer will be able to charge anybody the kite flying at midnight in the sky. Stake out, because if you understand the culture, that's what it is. It's stake out. And probably on the other side of it, it has no individual. Because the individual don't sleep out with the kite. The kite will be tied onto a pole. What kind of equipment you have in order to detect and trace the cord from the kite down to the person who is holding it? I consider this to be a piece of legislation as a big encroachment on the liberty of our people at a time when, especially to the Minister of Prevention of Crime, when these social activities contribute to demoralizing and the alternatives to criminal activity in the society, I just want to hear how each individual person who is responsible within this office, how from their perspective, how they would apply their sense of good judgment to this specific piece of legislation.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the honourable member knows that it is for me to determine who answers the questions on this side. And I therefore would be dealing with this issue myself. In the first place, it is not for the Chief Parliamentary Council to determine what they draft or do not draft. Nobody has to prove anything to any Chief Parliamentary Council. The honourable member has been a member of 2 cabinets. Been a member of cabinet under the honourable member for St. Peter, now of blessed memory, and a member of this cabinet. And therefore, from his personal experience, he well knows that the legislative process begins with the formulation of policy, which by a line ministry, which then has to go to cabinet for its approval. Should it be approved by cabinet, it is then sent by cabinet to the CPC for drafting. The CPC can decide, I don't like this, I don't like that, send me proof of this or send me proof of that. That is not and can never be their remit. Then once it passes CPC, it comes back to Parliament and comes to the chamber. This will not be the first piece of, and is either comes back to cabinet, and if approved by cabinet, it comes to the chamber. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are pieces of legislation from time immemorial that honourable members have not agreed with. Some in this parliament, others in previous parliaments. And an honourable member is entitled, when the whip is not on, to disagree with any piece of legislation that he wishes. I would only suggest, though, that the place and time to disagree with it is at the time of the debate and not at the time of the consideration of the budget for the ministry. There is no line item in this budget relating to apprehension of people who are breaking the kite flying with a bull law. There is none. And therefore, I cannot attempt to justify any line item because there is none. Secondly, sir, I would say the police detect and investigate crime. That's what they do. If the determining factor on whether we pass a law or not had to do with how easy it would be for the police to detect a crime, or how easy it would be for the police to hold and charge somebody, then we probably would not amend the Firearms Act. We probably might not even pass the Firearms Act, or a Money Laundering Act, or a Cybercrime Act. How hard or difficult it is to enforce is not a consideration. What is a consideration, though, is the purpose of the legislation, which was well set out in that statute. And that bill, sir, was passed by this chamber and fully ventilated on that occasion.
Unfortunately, this is not always a debate, but I was talking about process, and I know measures were highlighted about reform in the discussion, and I made it very clear that I'm not talking about specifically about what transpired, and I understood exactly that the act was already passed. But I'm just saying that I feel that more power should be vested in the Chief Parliamentary Council. And I'm also saying that I would love to hear the voice of the minister responsible for prevention of crime and the value of having empirical evidence sometimes, especially since I feel as a parliamentary representative of not only St. Michael's East, of the people of Barbados, I believe I have the legitimacy to answer that question, and even the Attorney General can't stop me from answering the question.
And nor would he. Nor would he.
And that's where you make the law. Value judgment, buddy.
Honorable members.
No.
There must be order in this house.
Mr. Chairman, I get a little
chair.
confused, but I have a lot of, you allow a lot of chairmen to speak. I have female chairman, a male chairman, and everything.
Honorable member.
Now,
Do you have your third question?
A third?
You asked two.
Man, don't try to do that to me.
Anyway, you proceed, honorable member.
Anyhow, look, there's a big pressing question in Barbados at present, especially in relation, and I'm not encroaching on any matter before the court. I'm talking about something that occurred before. There's a big question. There's a lot of controversy in Barbados surrounding beach lands. Beach lands. I've seen all types of references in relation to what conventions and what statutory provisions can be applied to the specific case or cases. Now, I am unclear on how conventions in some cases can overrule statutory provisions in the law. And I think this is the appropriate place, or even if it's not the appropriate place, probably pardon my ignorance and lack of education in formulating the questions, and other people that has had less education than me seem to be brighter than me and can talk on these issues. But all I'm asking is that I've been hearing a lot of views being expressed about accretion. I don't know what is accretion. But I know that on more than one occasion, that I assume is a convention. I'm assuming it's a convention. I answer for clarity. On many occasions, I've heard the act related to the NCC being applied, the act to coastal being applied, and there seem to be some landowners still believe that they can do what they want to do as long as the water has passed the high water mark. They lay claims to possession Not necessarily ownership, because that'd be an argument again, but they're claiming it's a possession of that area of land. I feel that I'm just suggesting, and I'm suggesting because the Solicitor General office is here, I am suggesting that we have a clear look at that specific social issue, because at some point in time, if we don't address it now, it will become a major social, it can cause major social conflict in the society. That's the kind of question I want to ask, without any intention to cause embarrassment by a lesser mortal to those who are people in authority. So I just want to know, what intentions do we have addressing this issue? It is coming up over and over again. And I just want to know if there's any provisions or recommendations, just like the one that is sent down for kites in the middle of all kind of intensive criminal activities, and you prioritize it, although you got all kind of challenges within the office, 20 lawyers, 3 major divisions, but kites become a major issue. So I just want to know, do you have any intentions to put this on the table for discussion within whatever the relevant individual or the relevant unit within the ministry to address this specific issue?
Thank you very much for your third question, Honourable Member. That was so much. I believe I saw 3 follow-ups in there. While you have mentioned the Solicitor General, let me say that that is not really a matter for the Solicitor General. We've spoken earlier in this chamber about the Law Reform Commission, and to the extent that there may be a matter of pressing societal concern which may require legislation, that is exactly the thing that the Law Reform Commission is set up to do. They have the capacity to study the issue, to research the law, to consult with individuals, and to make a recommendation on what, if any, legislative approach should be taken. The matter of what is a beach is one I wouldn't detain the chamber with at this point in time. But I will say that, as you know, beach is defined under the National Conservation Commission Act as being as land adjoining the foreshore of Barbados and extending not more than 33 meters before the landward limit of the foreshore. So if you take the high water mark and go back 33 meters, that area, beach is defined as including that, but including has a special meaning in law, which I don't know that we need to get into. The matter of public beaches, and that's the context really within which this issue has been arising, is a matter of common law. And the common law position is that from the sea to the high water mark is public. And the history, I'm not going to take you back to all that, but historically my recollection is that was determined as the swath of land along which the king shall pass and no mortal should stop him. And that is the genesis of us saying that nobody can stop you from going on that area of land between the high water mark and the water itself. To the extent that it requires that it may be considered for legislative changes, if that is the will of the people, that would be a matter of policy that I couldn't comment on. But that is exactly the kind of thing that the Law Reform Commission can look at and make recommendations on it. It would not be a matter, though, for the Solicitor General. I can tell you that individuals have approached the Law Reform Commission. The Law Reform Commission, as part of its mandate, must meet with individuals. And so we've had individuals from BAMP who have written to say, I want to meet with the commission. They've been accommodated. We've had individuals from Labour write and say, I want to meet with the commission to discuss these things. And they've discussed in each instance things that did not necessarily relate to their particular interests or to the interests of their particular pressure group. But I can say to you that the Commission is more than happy to have meetings with the public to discuss matters like this. And I would urge you, Honourable Member, if there's sufficient interest in it, that you could and should make a representation to the Law Reform Commission and argue to them that it is an area which requires reform, and they will get about that work looking at the policy issues and the law relating to it.
Thank you. I can give you the assurance, not even if I should, I can give you the assurance I will.
Good.
I will participate in it because I believe it's a matter that needs to be addressed seriously. And as you said, as a consequence of my time being here on all different types of administration, it means that it becomes more, the onus is really placed upon me to do my duty to the country itself. Now, the last question, Mr. Chair, if you permit.
Allow him now, it's 5:29.
No, okay, let me make it brief.
No, go ahead.
No.
I beg for you.
No. Lots of young men going into prison. So what is called crimes, and for me, in some cases, only deviant acts out of stupidity. But when they get into the prison, they get into prison with not seasonal, but seasoned prisoners. I believe it is an area that we need to focus our attention on, because sometimes the prison becomes an academy. And most of the time, the fears that a young man will have before being incarcerated, after the magistrate or the judge direct him to the prison, when he comes back out, sometimes becomes a graduate. And he no longer has to face the fears of being in prison. Are we putting any mechanisms in place so that these young men would not become victims of the system, the institutionalization of DODs? And are we doing something within the prison system that will help to cultivate them into civil citizens, that when they return into society for what I call the reintegration process, that we at least will be able to detect a high percentage of them showing some level of reform.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I wish that I could engage you on the matter that you've raised. I think it is an important question of seminal interest. The only challenge that I have, though, is that those matters in relation to prison and rehabilitation in prison no longer lie within the Office of the Attorney General, but lie under the portfolio of the Minister of Home Affairs. I will say, though, that while the Minister of Home Affairs has the responsibility for dealing with the matters that you have just adumbrated, we recognize that the prison can be a revolving door. And therefore, that puts pressure on the programs that we have to put in place, because we're not just interested, we're interested in crime prevention, but we're also interested in reducing recidivism. And therefore, many of the programs of Minister Lane, in the same way that they would impact on individuals who we're trying to keep out of that criminal network, will be of relevance to individuals who are in it, but who we need to wrestle from in it. And therefore, I would ask Minister Lane to comment on that limited perspective. But I just want to reiterate that those matters, as raised by you, do not properly fall under the portfolio of this ministry. Minister Lane?
Thank you very much, AG, and thank you, Honourable Member for St. Michael East. As the AG said, the Ministry of Home Affairs has the responsibility of the prison and the rehabilitation programs therein. Of course, we have a number of recommendations that we've made to them in terms of policies and various things like that. One of the things we take interest in the crime prevention space is that if you look at the statistics coming out of Barbados, we have a fluctuating recidivism rate of 60 to 70%, which means that every 10 inmates coming out of prison, you can almost guarantee that 6 to 7 of them will commit some crime again within the next 1 to 5 years. Obviously, that is cause of concern, and if you want to truly prevent crime, that will ensure that you would work with that cadre of persons. One of the programs we have proposed in the next financial year is a program called Startwise, and there is another program working specifically with the existing agencies treating to former inmates. And one of those programs is really like a self-help program. We all know of the great talent and skills coming out of the prison, and we want to ensure that we can provide facilities, support, training, and employment and entrepreneurship activities coming out to that. I want to give one example that I'm really passionate about. It's something that would have been raised with me with one of our ambassadors. And I didn't seek permission of the house to call the name, so I won't call the name. But it's to get some of these vacant facilities at the BIDC and be able to set up some cottage industries so that the guys can continue their trade in their space and be supported by the government and society to help with our rehabilitation. Because in speaking to a lot of former inmates, and people wonder if prison is so hard, why they go back to prison. A number of them will tell you that prison is hard, but sometimes society is harder when they come out. So we want to make sure that we have just that as one example to continue to work with the guys. There are other examples, but due to the limited time we have to present, I would say that that is one of the major ones that we will be pursuing, along with partnering with the Ministry of Home Affairs with a number of other programs that I'm sure they have on their cards for this financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for allowing me my right to answer the important question. My rights. My rights. And thank you very much, AG and Minister responsible for the prevention of crime. The presentations and the way in which they deliver themselves, I'm mighty pleased.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. You represent the good people of St. Michael East, so they have to be heard at times. You have to give a little latitude. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honourable Attorney General. You will now have 10 minutes to wrap up. They said.
First, let me express my gratitude to the senior staff of the Office of the Attorney General, ably led by the Permanent Secretary, who has sat to my left during the course of this sitting. I am the head of the office as Attorney General, but the Office of the Attorney General does not belong to me. Having sat in Cabinet now on 2 occasions, I well know what it is like to be Attorney General one day and not to be Attorney General the next day. But the Office of the Attorney General is that office, as I said at the beginning, which is responsible for maintaining law and order and securing, it might be, and securing the rule of law. And the importance of the members of the staff who have sat here with me cannot be understated. Some of them are new to the office, some of them have been here for a while, but without exception, their hard work is appreciated by me as their minister, and on behalf of all of my colleagues in the executive, all of Parliament, and all of Barbados, I wish on the record to thank them for those sterling efforts. Mr. Chairman, the issues before Barbados are very, very much capable of resolution when it comes to the rule of law, when it comes to maintaining law and order. But we will resolve them to our satisfaction only to the extent that we stay true to our mission and that we follow through on the responsibilities that the people of Barbados have given to us. From the very outset, we knew that the days ahead were going to be rocky. And that, you could call it a prediction, we've seen it every single day at every turn in what we've done. But in every instance, Mr. Chairman, as problems present themselves, we have looked for responses. When I look at the area of law enforcement, law and order, we recognize that individuals were committing crimes and coming out on bail, and specifically murders, sir. Individuals, young men, were committing homicides, going to prison on remand, getting bail, coming back out, committing more murders, being remanded again, coming back out again. And the reason they were getting bail, Mr. Chairman, has largely been because of the delays in the criminal justice system in addressing their cases, getting their cases before the courts quickly. Now, whether I like it or not, the law is the law. And since the 1990s, when we amended our Bail Act, that Bail Act has made provision, though in the early days it was seldom used, but that Bail Act made provision for individuals who were charged with any offense, including a homicide, to get bail. That was and still is the law. But how have we responded to that, sir? We responded to it by recognizing if the problem is that people are coming out and committing offenses because the case is not coming through quickly, then let us deal with the cases. Let's make sure they get through the judicial system swiftly. So we responded to it by increasing the number of criminal judges and again last year by increasing the number of criminal judges. We don't get to decide if you're guilty or not. That is a matter for the jury. But our job is to make sure that your case is heard swiftly. We've given the Director of Public Prosecutions a solemn mandate that all pending murder cases, and Mr. Speaker, they are in the 90s now, all pending murder cases must be concluded by the end of this year. We've also given the DPP another solemn mandate that in addition to dealing as a matter of priority with those people who have multiple murder charges, that we are also to deal with the most recent homicide cases swiftly, because we need to send a message. What message does a state send when in the year 2023 it is trying a homicide case that was committed 10 years ago? What message are we sending? You know, Mr. Speaker, anybody who troubles to listen to me, and I imagine not many people do, but anybody who troubles to listen to me will know that occasionally I reflect on my childhood when in this chamber. And you know, I always used to like it when my mother said, wait till your father come home. Licks to be shared, you know. But instead of delivering those licks immediately, remember for St. Thomas, she'd tell you, wait till your father come home. Now, you know when daddy come home, daddy tired, daddy hungry. Licks not on daddy mind. Okay? The point I'm trying to make by using that personal analogy is that there's a sense when you delay dealing with a situation and when you delay a punishment, that the person they ain't bothered by the punishment. We will go back and do the same thing because it was wait till daddy come home. Now, in a sense, the judicial system has been much like that. Because a person commits a criminal offense, a very serious criminal offense today, a murder today, 2 years pass, 3 years pass, 5 years pass, 10 years pass, and he hasn't faced the courts yet. Now, I am pleased to see that that is already beginning to change, sir. We had an individual who was who was charged with homicide, I think it was in 2018 or 2019. And his matter was heard before the courts late last year, and he has received, or was it early this year? I don't even remember. But the point is, we've begun to cut down those delays, and we've said to the DPP, all of these murder trials, all of them, we want them done before the year is out. We have to bring this system to being current. Because, Mr. Chairman, when you bring the offenses current, then the other matters will be dealt with quickly, and the delays will not become features of the system, and you will not have this vexing problem with individuals who get remanded on homicide, come out on bail because of delay, and go and commit other offenses. We've responded to a challenge. And at every step of the way, sir, we have sought to respond to the challenge that has been thrown up in our faces by the system. But that is how we do things. A former Prime Minister used to say, face it and fix it. And that is exactly how we're approaching it. But I remind the Chamber, and in a significant earlier discussion, we talked about partnerships. Member for St. James South, partnerships. Because government does not solve a society's problems. Government will provide the resources. Government will provide strategic direction. Government will provide a whole lot of things. But, sir, governments do not raise children. Governments do not reside in communities. And so our response to that particular challenge has been, for the first time, to establish a new sub-program led by the Honourable Member for the City as a Minister of State to address the issue of crime prevention. Now, sir, the police department has a crime prevention officer. One, a single crime prevention officer. And we hear him on the radio and so on. But a police force, a police service is designed, and by a statute it says it's to investigate and detect crime. By its nature, while prevention of crime is always going to be part of its mandate, it is not necessarily set up as the kind of establishment that is designed from its bottom up to deal with preventing crime. And so our response has been to establish a sub-program in the ministry and to have given it $12.5 million. These are troubling times, sir, and we recognize that the police service cannot do everything on the budget that it had, and we've increased their budget by almost $20 million. All across the Office of the Attorney General, all across this Ministry of Legal Affairs, sir, we have tried to make sure that every single program is given the resources that they need to be able to meet the challenges ahead. Minister Lane is going to rely heavily on the Criminal Justice Research Project. The Criminal Justice Research Unit. That unit, sir, has the responsibility. We didn't get to talk about this work today, but that unit will do a lot of the research that will inform the kinds of policies that the member for the city will spearhead. And the policies that we spearhead will inform the legislative approaches that we take, that the CPC will do. So, sir, it is a tremendously interconnected enterprise in the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs. But at every stage, sir, at every stage, we commit to making sure that Barbadians are fairly treated by the law, by the courts, by that blind lady that we all call justice. Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of work ahead of us. And I am excited about what the coming financial year will hold. I'm excited at the successes that are portended for us by the budgetary provision that has been made, but I'm especially excited by the enthusiasm of my team and by the commitment of my colleagues. And with that, I again beg to move that Head 30 stand part. As amended.
The question is that Head 30 stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 10 minutes past 6.
Question that this honorable chairman be suspended until 10 minutes after 6. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended until 10 minutes after 6.